From Fox 8 Sports, this is the Overtime Podcast.
From the Gulf Coast Studios in New Orleans, this is the Overtime Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Fazende, riding shotgun as he does each and every podcast. It's Andre Johnson.
Junior.
Do not forget the Junior. Very important. Remember the JR at the end of the name. Before we get into today's content, be sure to like, to share, to rate, to review. If you're watching us on YouTube, you already know. Hit that subscribe button, please. Get the bell notification. But when we drop that, fire content. Also, hi, hello, Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network. Glad you have found us here. Please stay here and tell your friends here about us on this wonderful network known as the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network. And also, hello to those of you that found us on Roku. Once again, glad you have found us here. Overtime Podcast is everywhere. Andre, we are moving right along. Busy week, important week in the NFL calendar because on Thursday, we will know the full schedule. But today we got 1/18 of the schedule because there was 18 weeks in NFL season. We know one opponent, we know one location, and we know one date for the 2026 Saints season, which is always a fun day and a fun thing to discuss. So we're going to get into that, obviously, and some other stuff. But first things first, how you feeling?
I'm feeling good, solid Wednesday. Excited for tomorrow because the NFL schedule drops, and it's huge because obviously you know the opponents, but I've said it in the past, it's a difference between having to play a team in September and having to play a team in December. I know not too long ago they played the Packers late in the season.
2 days before Christmas.
Yeah, Lambeau Field in December, a lot different than Lambeau Field when we went a few years ago together, and I believe it was week 3 of the season.
Week 3, it changed the whole trajectory of the season.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a lot different. So I'm excited for tomorrow's schedule release. But like you said, we did get a part of the schedule, and it's an important part because it's the NFL's first regular season game in Paris. We now know officially it'll be Saints versus Steelers, not the Browns as was previously reported a few months ago. Now it's official, Saints-Steelers. It'll be Tyler Shuck versus,
I guess, Aaron Rodgers.
Who knows? Aaron Rodgers, Drew Aller. We'll see who they got when we get there, but we know who we got. That's Tyler Shuck. Are you excited for this game? What were your takeaways when you saw that the Saints were getting the Steelers in Paris?
Yeah, well, it's I kind of got four takeaways just from this. And it's funny the way your mind works when you get really just one bit of information, just how many layers, just that one little bit of information can certainly impact, all kind of analysis. But let's just start with this. It's not the Browns, it is the Steelers. So it goes to show you that, when I went and spoke with Mrs. Benson the day after this Paris, France thing was announced, she was adamant in telling me, we're not sure if it's the Browns, we're not sure if it's the Browns, we're not sure if it's the Browns. They knew it was going to be the Saints, weren't sure if it was going to be the Browns. October 25th was the date then. They weren't ready to say that then, the Saints were not, but obviously that ended up holding true. So it just goes to show you the initial report, I think it was a French newspaper that reported it, isn't always accurate. And I heard, it's funny, whispers started to come out early Tuesday morning about, look, it may not be the Browns, it may not be the Browns, it may not be the Browns. And sure enough, it was not the Browns, it's the Pittsburgh Steelers. So I guess you can call this a marquee matchup for the Saints. The Browns have the easiest schedule in the NFL. The Saints have the second easiest schedule in the NFL. So Saints get the Steelers. Number 2 is simply this. This is Mrs. Benson's baby.
Yeah.
This is probably, as an NFL owner, 131 because the Packers do, the group thing, stock and all that stuff. 1 of 31. This is probably, arguably, one of her biggest contributions to the NFL during her tenure as owner, sole owner of the New Orleans Saints. This has her name all over it. She worked hard for it. She knew that once the NFL wanted to expand to a place like France, a city like Paris, why wouldn't you want a piece of that market? That she wanted the Saints front and center. She understood the moment. She coordinated talks with French leaders, Paris leaders, NFL leaders, Saints, local personnel, anything you got to do. And it took quite a few years to get this done, as you might imagine. This is not dealing with Mobile, Alabama. You're talking about Paris, France, a historical city with obviously a lot going on in that part of the world, a whole different continent, a whole different country. So this was sort of her contribution. This is really what she wanted. It's probably one of her biggest contributions as an NFL owner to date. Which brings me to my next point, and that is, and Mickey Loomis alluded to this, I think he did an interview with French media. Yeah. How will the Saints handle international travel? I am fascinated by this. I travel with the team. And the last time I went to London was back in 2022. They went up the whole week. The Vikings did not go up the whole week. They ended up there on a Friday. I know the Saints have, at least it's been reported or talked about, that potentially them trying to get the Thursday night game before the international game and possibly having the mini bye before they go. You can request that. It doesn't mean you're going to get that. So I'm very curious to see how they handle that, because the trend lately there's a ton of international games, is to do, I think other than maybe Jacksonville, who might do back-to-back games, there's one or two teams that do that. The trend now is to arrive late. You start the practice week here, then you fly up, and then you get that day and a half acclimation, then you play the game, and then you get out. However, the Saints have always been the type of team or organization that wants to stay the whole week. And given the fact of what I just said, this is Mrs. Benson's she's got her handprints all over this. I just wonder how they handle travel this week, because it certainly feels like if the prior 3 times in England you went the whole week, you'd probably want to do the same given the connections to the city. And look, this is not England. This is France. This is Paris. This is New Orleans. There's a huge connection. French culture, French Quarter, everything. The cultures are very, very close, and obviously there's a strong connection. So I think this is a bigger trip for Mrs. Benson than other international trips. So I'm very curious to see how they handle travel. My final point is this. When I went in 2022, they faced the Minnesota Vikings week 4. At that time, the Saints were given the option to take the bye week in week 5. Mickey Loomis confirmed this to us. They declined the opportunity to take the bye week in week 5 because they felt like that bye week was too early. And if you recall, 2022 was a nightmare because they didn't get it in week 5. They didn't get it till week 14 in December. Way too late. This game, October 25th, according to my math, is week 7 in the NFL season, which means if they still do the same thing where you get the week off after, or you get the option to get the week off after the international contest, it would be my belief that the Saints would prefer to have the bye week the following week, which would be week 8, not too early, not too late. It would probably fall right in line with the window they like to have their bye week. So a lot of different layers to this. How do they travel? Are they guaranteed the bye week in week 8? Not the Browns, it's the Steelers. And it should be a fun midseason matchup out there in Paris, France. And I'm sure a lot of Saints fans out there have already started to look and possibly book flights and book trips and possibly planning. I mean, how many opportunities do you get to go to Paris, France and see your favorite football team in the process? So I look for a huge contingent of Saints fans traveling from here to there, and possibly a lot of Saints fans already in France. Maybe not know a whole lot about football, but given the French connection, I could see them being probably a home away from home for the Saints. What say you?
Yeah, I'm excited for it. I mean, like I mentioned earlier, this is the NFL's first regular season game in Paris, and this isn't happening, no offense, in Galveston, Texas. Like you said, This is Paris, France. This is one of the premier cities on the planet, and the Saints are playing the NFL's first regular season game there, and not just an honor from that perspective, but also to play on the field. I mean, I don't know if we consider this a prime time game per se. It's not Monday Night Football, Thursday Night Football, Sunday Night Football, but they'll be the only team on TV. 8:30 in the morning, it's early, but they will be the only team on TV. And when people get up and start their football Sundays, it'll be Saints Steelers that'll be on that they can watch. And, you know, like I said, this isn't your typical prime time game, but in games like this, where the Saints have been the only team on television playing, they haven't had a lot of success lately. Obviously, no primetime games last season. They went 0-3 in primetime games in 2024. They had the Monday night against Kansas City. They lost that. The Thursday night at home against Denver. Sean Payton's return.
Beginning of the end right there.
Yeah, that was painful to sit through. And speaking of painful, they had Monday Night Football later that season against the Green Bay Packers. Lambeau Field, they got shut out. They are 1-8 in primetime games since 2022. So this is a team that when they have been put on the national stage, they haven't exactly put forth their best foot or played their best brand of football. But it's kind of the dawn of a new era for the Saints. It's not a new regime from management, but a new head coach, a new quarterback, a new excitement around this team. So I'm excited to see the Saints have this spotlight against a very beatable Steelers team. I mean, this isn't the Steelers with Ben Roethlisberger. This isn't the steel curtain back there. This is the Steelers that just fired, let go, parted ways, however you want to say it, with Mike Tomlin. They have Mike McDaniel now.
Mike McCarthy.
Mike McCarthy. I've done that before. There's something about these. I've done that a lot before. Yeah. They have Mike McCarthy now as their head coach, and this is a beatable team in Paris. And, I was listening to Mickey Loomis. He talked to French media, like you said, for about 35 minutes. And, I mean, he's excited. They sent Tyler Shuck and Taliesin Fuaga out to Paris a couple months ago just to kind of get the lay of the land, do some promotion and everything. And those two came back and said they were actually surprised about how much football the fans out there know. And we know their brand of football is played with your feet. They don't necessarily know as much about American football, so we think, but they say it's bigger, out there in the fandom than you would expect, and the Saints having experience from playing these international games, that's going to play a factor in this, from support teams, medical staffs, food, all of the little things that it takes to bring hundreds of people to Paris for a week. I do expect them to make this a Monday to Sunday type of trip because we've seen them do that in the past. And Mickey Loomis, when he was talking, really put an emphasis on creating new Saints fans. I mean, he said it. The Saints or Louisiana, it was a French colony, There's French roots all
everywhere
across this city,
the street signs.
Exactly. So when you think about French and New Orleans and Louisiana, all the way to the Florida League, it just makes sense. So, he talked about just kind of starting to build that rapport with the city of Paris and with the fans out there. And to do that, you kind of have to be out there for an entire week. So I like everything about the fact that the Saints get to take on the Steelers in Paris, except one thing I don't like. I'm not an 8:30 in the morning kind of guy, Sean.
It's not 8:30 out there. It's not 8:30 out there, but it'll be 8:30
That's what I'm saying. I'm more of a wake up at 10:45 kind of guy. So 8:30 is a little.
He don't have kids yet. He don't have kids.
Yeah, 8:30 is a little early for me, but just this once, I will set an alarm and be up bright and early to watch this game.
I wonder, since the Saints are, I guess, I don't know what to call it, like the host city or the ambassador, I don't know what the official term is to not just France, but also Italy as well. If we should just expect an international game in one of those countries basically every year from here on out, or at least for the foreseeable future, especially Paris. Now, obviously, there's a strong Italian culture in New Orleans as well, so maybe that could be something that they get to at some point down the road. But the Paris thing is real. Paris thing is going to happen, and the Paris thing is I'm fascinated by it because you can make an argument either way with the travel, because I know the Saints looked at what Minnesota did because it was two distinctly different approaches, and the Saints had the rally to come back in that game. If you remember, that was Will Lutz, double doink, missed it. It was like a 60-plus yard field goal. It was close, but they couldn't get it done. Andy Dalton was the quarterback. Remember, Andy and Jameis both talked to us that week, but when you went to practice, it was very clear Andy was practicing and Jameis was not. It was pretty clear that Andy was going to be the quarterback, Andy Dalton. So the Vikings flew in late Thursday night, got a practice Friday, and somehow they were ready to go Sunday. That's a huge logistical thing to go international. So I wonder maybe – I don't even want to speculate. I just wonder how they do the travel this time around, because this is not just any old international game. This is not London round 4. This will be Paris round 1, which is very important to the team owner, Gail Benson. So it should be a great matchup. One of the Saints home games.
Yeah.
One of the Saints home games. Hopefully it will feel like a Saints home game in Paris, France. What we got next?
Up next, we're going into one of my wheelhouses.
There we go.
From where football and the WWE coincide, they intersect, they clash. The son of Scott Steiner, WWE Hall of Famer, Brock Rechsteiner, has officially signed as a wide receiver with the Saints. He went to rookie minicamp. And guys, this isn't just celebrity son, we got to give him an opportunity. Sean, you were at rookie camp, and one of the guys that stood out on the field, not just a name on a piece of paper, was young Steiner.
Yeah. First off, went and refreshed the Scott Steiner clips on YouTube. Just going through some old promos, and he was quite a guy. He's in the Hall of Fame. Man, he called himself the genetic freak. I mean, he was big and vascular. I mean, he was huge. So obviously, from a genetic standpoint, the younger Steiner, I guess I should say Rechsteiner, Brock Rechsteiner, had the genetics to be a football player. The son, Rechsteiner, who's now with the Saints, also has a career or plans to at some point pursue the WWE as well. But I got to say this because I wanted to say this in our last pod where we talked about Jordan Tyson. We just ran out of time because I had a list of guys that stood out. It wasn't a very long list because, frankly, you can't really see too much at rookie minicamp. There's not enough. But I kept my eyes, obviously, on the wide receivers. So I was watching Barry and Brown. I was watching Bryce Lance. I was watching Jordan Tyson. And they're just doing the regular routes on there. Then all of a sudden, I look down and I see a guy, and he runs this slant route. And they're running it against a coach. It's a routes on there type thing. They're all just running a slant. And I noticed he was very crafty out of his break where he pivoted outside to get the coach to kind of turn, and he broke back in and caught the slant. I said, That's the look of a guy that understands the technical aspects of running a route. And I looked, I can't remember who I was talking to. I said, who was that? And they said, that's the wrestler's son. I was like, oh, okay. And at the time, I was like, I wonder if he's one of the guys they bring in because he kept watching him. It was like he had a natural feel for football. You see the way he's built. I mean, he's powerfully built especially for a wide receiver. He's 6'2", so he's got good size. I don't know what his actual 40 time is. So I guess 4'5". Yeah. So point being, like, I didn't know who he was, and I noticed him. Just a couple of reps, nothing crazy, but I thought maybe that's somebody they could bring in to training camp. And let's be realistic, it's a very crowded wide receiver room. He's got an uphill battle to make the roster, but this is not crazy to think a guy like this out of Jacksonville State could be a practice squad guy, maybe somebody that can develop at some point.
Yeah, I definitely nerded out about this one because I'm a big WWE guy. Obviously, his father being Scott Steiner, but his cousin being, his birth name is Bronson Rechsteiner, but he goes by Bron Breakker in the WWE. He's been at back-to-back WrestleManias. He's been Intercontinental Champion. And you talk about a physical freak of nature, similar to Scott Steiner. Bron Breakker is a physical freak of nature. He's a dog, as they say, and he's one of WWE's up-and-coming young stars. He'll probably be a WrestleMania main eventer, maybe here if we ever get our WrestleMania back.
Hopefully.
But that's another conversation for another day. But, this family, they're not just a wrestling family. They're kind of a football family too, because Bron Breakker, or Bronson Rechsteiner at the time, he played linebacker, running back, and fullback in college. He went on to be at the Baltimore Ravens, training camp, and he was with the organization for a while at running back, fullback, before eventually taking that step over to the WWE. So this is a family that has played a lot of football, and Brock Rechsteiner, not Bronson Rechsteiner, over at Jacksonville State, 5 touchdowns last year, a couple hundred yards. He's done some good things. So it's interesting because this wide receiver room has a lot of names, but there's really only 4 or 5 guys that you can look at and be like, yeah, they'll for sure have, a definite role on this team. There's a lot of room for competition, and just because you're wide receiver 6, 7, 8 doesn't mean you'll get on the field. Because think about the group of receivers we were watching in the second half of the season last year. I mean, between Dante Pettis, Kevin Austin Jr., Mason Tipton, Samari Toure, all of those guys wound up actually starting games and playing real minutes and real snaps. So, having depth at the receiver position is big. Brock Rechsteiner, as a fan of the family, I hope that he is able to make the team and, get something good going. And if he doesn't, I promise you they got a spot in WWE for him.
Well, it sounds like that's his long-term plan because obviously the NFL is coming out of Jacksonville State. You're not always going to be a high priority. And it certainly sounds like that's really the next step for him once football is completely, he exhausts every avenue, much like his cousin did, who was, I think by the time he got to the NFL level, he was playing fullback with the Ravens training camp. During a Ravens training camp, and then obviously transition to what he's doing now. It sounds like Brock, who currently plays for the Saints now that he signed that contract, will eventually pursue that, unless, hey, this NFL thing lasts a little bit longer. Again, catch on to a practice squad, keep battling, keep going, keep getting better, and keep doing it like I don't want to overreact to anything, but he stood out to me based off of the way I saw him run a route. I did not even know who he was. I remember somebody saying there was going to be a wrestler's son there. I had no idea who he was because, you're just getting familiar with the roster. So there were some football things that I really liked. Now, like I said, he's built like his dad. Not as big as his dad, but
most people aren't as
very,
big as
very muscular for a receiver, which I guess can help in some ways. Sometimes that can lead to a little stiffness in running routes, but he looked pretty fluid for a guy that size, 6'2", runs a 4.5. So you never know what could happen. So we'll see if they got a WWE son on the Saints roster this year.
And if it doesn't work out, he can always go for the tag team titles in a couple years.
That's it.
Now, the last thing we got yesterday, it came out that Nick Saldiveri was going on the PUP list, and the report is that he's out for the rest of the season. To lose, obviously Saldiveri probably wasn't going to be a starter, but we talk about how important depth is at that position on the offensive line. So to lose one of your depth pieces, especially on the interior offensive line, which we both pinned down as a need for the Saints at the beginning of the offseason, and they've definitely addressed that in both free agency and the draft. But to lose a depth piece this early, is that a blow?
I would normally say so, but the truth of the matter is Saldiveri hasn't been available for a while. He's been injured for a while, and this was the corresponding move because you bring somebody on, somebody's come off, somebody's got to go off some kind of way, and it was the reserve PUP, which apparently if you do this version of PUP, your season is done. And Nick Saldiveri has battled injuries really since he's been with the Saints. I know he had a small stint as a starter. Didn't last very long. I think it was year 2 for him. He had a small stint as a starter, or got at least a few starts. I've talked to him a couple times. Just a really pleasant guy to talk to. You hate that this happens to people like this because I feel like, he's done it for the right reasons. He was at, I think, Old Dominion, and we were talking because it was right around the start of the NIL, and he got offers to transfer. He stuck it out. I guess I'm a little bit of a sucker for stuff like that. I'm like, I want to see guys like that succeed, and I thought he would. I remember the Saints traded up to get him. I think it was like the first or second pick of day 3 of that draft. So I think there was some high hopes for him to develop into something. It just hasn't. Now he's going to go reserve PUP. This is the final year of his contract. You just wonder if he's played his last down as a Saint. But the bigger picture, Andre, is, that 2023 class just has not worked out. Brian Brzee, obviously, I think is a guy that's going to stick around, just pick you up the 5th-year option. So I like, obviously, Brian Brzee. We'll see how he translates year 2. Brandon Staley, we've talked about that ad nauseum. But I like him. But outside of that, Isaiah Foskey. Kendre Miller, another one that just cannot stay healthy and just seems to lack the I don't know what you call it, but he doesn't necessarily take the precautions to prevent getting injured.
Right.
Now Nick Saldiveri, Jake Haener. Howden is a guy that's at least stuck around. At least he's probably giving you at least I think it was a 5th-round pick, so at least he's giving you something for a 5th-round pick of decent value. But he's obviously not a game changer. And most 5th-round picks are not. And then A.T. Perry, remember him? He's been gone for a while. So that 2023 draft class, now that they're in year 4, not a whole lot to show. And that was a draft class that I remember being fairly excited about a couple years back, but it has just not panned out.
Yeah, it was one of those things where when you look at the positions they drafted, it was really easy to be excited because it's like, okay, Brian Brzee, a big defensive tackle, and like you said, he's succeeded so far in his NFL career. Isaiah Foskey, and this wasn't a bum. He was a dominant at Notre Dame, one of the best defensive players that Notre Dame had seen in that era, and Isaiah Foskey gets to the Saints, a position that the Saints have been looking for a while, another edge pass rusher opposite Cam Jordan, and he just wasn't able to get it done. Kendre Miller, I remember, was controversial because Tyjae Spears from Tulane was also on the board, and you opt to pick Kendre Miller, and he's been injured essentially his entire career. Saldivari spent a lot of his career injured. Jake Haener had his moments where he could compete for the starting job and was never able to win that job. I mean, he couldn't beat Spencer Rattler out for that job. A.T. Perry, he was gone early, went to Denver. So when you look at 5 guys from that class, I know they say you kind of got to wait a few years to see how good or bad a draft class really is.
We waited.
That was a bad draft class.
Yeah,
you missed on that one, So that's why 2025 was so important, because the Saints had a lot of draft busts, in the years before then. So being able to hit, at least so far, on 25 was a big deal. Being able to have a 26 class that we can at least look at right now and be excited about, that's a big deal, But as for losing Nick Saldivari, like you said, you really haven't had Nick Saldivari ever because he's been hurt. So it stinks to lose a depth piece this early, but because you lost a depth piece this early, you have a lot of time until August, September to pick another one up to add some more depth to that offensive line room. So it stinks for Saldivari. You hate to see any player just continue to struggle with injuries.
The health part of it, yeah.
Yeah, and your season that you look forward to is over in May. So that sucks for sure. But, as for the Saints, next man up. That's how the NFL works.
Yeah, and look, and he's obviously not irreplaceable. You can find someone that can provide some depth. They drafted the young kid with Jeremiah Wright out of Auburn, interior, likely depth guy. Could be an opportunity where, maybe one of these undrafted guys, or maybe a second or third year guy that's kind of gotten lost in the shuffle before, all of a sudden the numbers gets one less. So maybe the numbers tend to work in your favor, and hopefully someone can seize that opportunity, because it's not a matter of if, it's when it comes to injuries to the offensive line. All right, that was fun. We got to get out of here. For Andre Johnson Jr., I am Sean Fazende. We are back tomorrow with the Saints' full schedule. So we'll catch you guys next time on Overtime.